The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone courtyard of Buckingham Palace as Sergeant William Thompson adjusted his iconic red tunic for the 100th time that week. At 32 years old, he had served as one of the Queen's Guard for over 8 years, and the routine had become second nature. Stand perfectly still, eyes forward, chin up, and never, under any circumstances, break character or move unless absolutely necessary. The tourists were already gathering, cameras clicking away as they tried to get the perfect shot of the stoic guards who had become symbols of British tradition. William had seen it all, people making faces, telling jokes, even attempting to touch his rifle. Through it all, he remained motionless, a living statue in his towering bearskin hat and pristine uniform. Today felt different somehow. Perhaps it was the crisp autumn air or the unusual number of families with young children milling about the palace gates. William noticed a small group approaching his post near the main entrance. A mother with tired eyes pushed a stroller while 3 young children skipped alongside her, their excitement barely contained. The youngest, a girl who couldn't have been more than 4 years old, broke away from the group and wandered directly toward William. Her bright yellow raincoat stood out against the gray morning, and her curly brown hair bounced with each step. She stopped just inches from his polished black boots and tilted her head back to look up at him. "Mummy, why is the big man so quiet?" she asked loudly, her voice echoing off the palace walls. Her mother quickly approached, apologizing profusely while trying to guide the child away. "I'm so sorry, officer. Emma, come away from the nice guard," the mother whispered urgently, clearly embarrassed by her daughter's boldness. But Emma wasn't finished. She reached into her small backpack and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. It was a drawing, clearly made by a child's hand, showing a stick figure in a red coat standing next to a castle. At the bottom, in wobbly letters, someone had written, "Thank you for keeping us safe." The little girl held the drawing up toward William, her innocent eyes filled with genuine gratitude. "This is for you, Mr. Guard. My teacher said you protect the Queen, so you protect me too." William felt something stir inside his chest. In all his years of service, tourists had photographed him, laughed at him, and occasionally showed frustration when he wouldn't respond to their antics. But never had a child approached him with such pure, heartfelt appreciation. The drawing fluttered slightly in the breeze as Emma continued to hold it up. Her mother had stopped apologizing and was now watching the scene unfold with curiosity. Other tourists began to gather, sensing that something special was happening. According to regulations, William should have remained perfectly still, ignoring the gesture entirely. The Queen's Guard were trained to be immovable, unresponsive to external stimuli. Breaking protocol could result in disciplinary action or even dismissal from the prestigious position. But as he looked down at Emma's hopeful face and the carefully crafted drawing she had made just for him, William felt the weight of tradition battling against something deeper, basic human kindness and acknowledgement of an innocent gift freely given. The seconds ticked by like hours. Emma's arm began to tremble slightly from holding up the drawing, but she didn't lower it. Her determination was absolute, her belief that this important-looking man would accept her gift unwavering. William could hear the whispers of the crowd growing louder. Someone mentioned getting video footage. Another person wondered aloud if the guard would break his stance. The tension in the air was palpable as everyone waited to see what would happen next. The drawing itself was remarkably detailed for a 4-year-old's work. Emma had taken considerable time and care with it, adding small flowers around the castle and what appeared to be a sun with a smiling face in the corner. It was clear this wasn't just a casual doodle, but something created with specific intention and purpose. William's mind raced through his options. He could continue to ignore the child, maintaining his professional demeanor until she eventually gave up and walked away. This would be the expected response, the one that honored centuries of tradition and military discipline. Or he could acknowledge this small act of kindness, this bridge between the formal world of royal protocol and the innocent gesture of a grateful child. The choice would define not just this moment, but potentially change how he viewed his role as both a guardian and a human being. Emma's mother knelt down beside her daughter, gently suggesting they leave the nice guard alone. But Emma shook her head firmly, her conviction unshaken. "He needs to know we appreciate him, Mummy. It's important." The wisdom in those simple words struck William like lightning. Here was a child who understood something that many adults missed entirely, that behind the uniform and ceremony stood a real person deserving of recognition and gratitude. As the crowd held its collective breath, William faced the most significant decision of his military career, one that would ripple far beyond this single morning at the palace gates. The moment stretched like an eternity as William felt every eye in the courtyard focused on him. Emma continued to hold up her drawing with the unwavering determination that only a 4-year-old could possess. Her small fingers gripped the paper tightly, and her bright eyes never left his face, waiting for some acknowledgement of her gift. Then, almost imperceptibly, William did something that would be talked about for years to come. He slowly, carefully, moved his eyes downward to look at the drawing. The slight movement of his head was barely noticeable, but it was enough. Emma's face lit up with the most radiant smile anyone in that courtyard had ever seen. "He looked at it, Mummy. The guard looked at my picture," she exclaimed with pure joy, bouncing on her toes. The crowd erupted in gentle applause and warm murmurs of approval. Phones and cameras captured the moment from every angle, but the real magic was happening in the space between a disciplined soldier and an innocent child who had managed to reach past centuries of protocol with nothing more than kindness and a crayon drawing. William's colleague, Corporal James Mitchell, stood at the adjacent post and witnessed the entire exchange. James had served alongside William for 3 years and had never seen his friend's composure crack even slightly. The subtle acknowledgement William had given the child was revolutionary in the context of their rigid duties. Emma's mother, Sarah Chun, felt tears welling up in her eyes. She had been going through a difficult divorce and struggling to maintain normalcy for her children. This simple moment of connection between her daughter and the guard represented something beautiful and hopeful in what had been a challenging time for their family. "What's your name, Mr. Guard?" Emma asked, still glowing with excitement from the acknowledgement she had received. Of course, William couldn't respond verbally. Speaking while on duty was strictly forbidden except in cases of emergency or direct security threats. But something remarkable happened next that no one expected. A gentle breeze swept through the courtyard, and Emma's drawing fluttered in her hands. As she adjusted her grip, a small piece of paper fell from her pocket. It was another drawing, this one showing a guard with a big smile, surrounded by children of different ages. At the bottom, in the same wobbly handwriting, it read, "Guards are heroes too." William watched as the paper danced across the cobblestones, coming to rest near his polished boot. Emma noticed it too and let out a small gasp. "Oh no, that one was supposed to be a surprise for later," she said, looking genuinely distressed that her second gift had been revealed accidentally. The crowd chuckled softly at her innocence, but William found himself deeply moved by the fact that this child had prepared multiple drawings, each one crafted with care and intention. It spoke to a level of thoughtfulness and appreciation that went far beyond a simple tourist interaction. Sarah knelt down to retrieve the fallen drawing, but as she reached for it, something unprecedented happened. William, maintaining his forward gaze and official posture, shifted his foot ever so slightly. The movement was minimal, but it placed his boot gently over the corner of the drawing, preventing it from blowing away in the wind. The gesture was subtle enough that casual observers might have dismissed it as coincidental, but those paying close attention recognized it for what it was, another small act of acknowledgement from a guard who was finding ways to connect with a child's gesture while still maintaining his professional duties. Emma clapped her hands together in delight. "He's helping save my picture. Mummy, did you see? He's keeping it safe." Other children in the crowd began to take notice of what was happening. A boy of about 6 approached cautiously, followed by his grandfather. In his hand, he held a small toy soldier, one that bore a striking resemblance to the guards in their red tunics and tall hats. "Grandpa, can I give this to the guard too?" the boy asked in a hushed voice. His grandfather, a man in his 70s with kind eyes and gentle hands, smiled and nodded. "I think that would be very nice, Thomas. These men do important work protecting our country." Soon, other children began approaching with their own small gifts and tokens of appreciation. A 7-year-old girl offered a handmade friendship bracelet. Twin boys brought a picture book about London that they wanted to share. An 8-year-old with paint-stained fingers presented a watercolor of the palace gates. The scene was transforming from a standard tourist visit into something much more meaningful. Parents and grandparents watched with growing emotion as their children spontaneously expressed gratitude to the guards in their own innocent ways. William found himself in an impossible situation. Each child approached with such genuine affection and appreciation that ignoring them completely seemed almost cruel. Yet his training and duty required him to remain motionless and unresponsive. Corporal Mitchell, observing the gathering of children around his colleague's post, began to understand that they were witnessing something extraordinary. This wasn't about tourists seeking entertainment or trying to get a reaction from the guards. These children were offering genuine respect and recognition for service, expressing gratitude in the most pure and uncomplicated way possible. The crowd of adults grew larger as word spread about the touching interaction taking place at the palace gates. But, rather than becoming a spectacle, the atmosphere remained respectful and warm. Parents helped their children understand the importance of the guards' work while encouraging their natural instinct to show appreciation. Emma, still holding her original drawing, looked up at William with unwavering confidence. "I know you can't talk to me, Mr. Guard, but I hope you know that lots of people think you're special. My daddy says heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear big fuzzy hats." Her innocent words carried a wisdom that cut straight to the heart of what it meant to serve others. William felt something shift inside him, a recognition that his role extended beyond simply standing guard. He was part of something larger, a symbol of protection, dedication, and service that inspired even the youngest citizens to express their gratitude as the morning progressed. What had started as a single child's gesture of appreciation transformed into something far more significant. Word of the heartwarming interaction began to spread beyond the immediate crowd at the palace gates. Tourists shared photos and videos on social media, and within hours, the story of Emma's drawing and William's subtle acknowledgement was being discussed around the world. But the real magic was still happening right there in the courtyard. Children continued to arrive with their families, many having heard from others about the special moment taking place. Each young visitor brought their own unique way of showing appreciation for the guards. A group of schoolchildren on a field trip approached with their teacher, Mrs. Patricia Hawkins, who had been teaching about British history and traditions. When she heard about what was happening at the palace, she decided to bring her class to witness this remarkable display of respect and gratitude. "Children," Mrs. Hawkins said quietly, "remember what we learned about how the Queen's Guard protect not just the royal family, but all of us. They stand here every day, rain or shine, keeping us safe." 9-year-old Marcus, who had been studying military history, stepped forward with a carefully written thank you letter. His handwriting was neat and deliberate, each word chosen with care. He approached William's post and, following Emma's example, held up his letter where the guard could see it. "Dear Queen's Guard," Marcus read aloud in a clear, respectful voice. "Thank you for your service to our country. I know you can't talk to us, but I want you to know that my whole class thinks you're amazing. We learned that you train very hard and work long hours to keep everyone safe. That makes you a hero in my book. Sincerely, Marcus Thompson." The fact that Marcus shared the same surname as William wasn't lost on the guard, who felt a strange connection to this earnest young boy. As Marcus finished reading, he carefully placed the letter on the ground near William's post, weighing it down with a small stone so it wouldn't blow away. Other children followed suit, each finding their own way to express gratitude while respecting the guard's inability to respond verbally. A shy 6-year-old girl named Lucy sang a soft, sweet version of "God Save the Queen" in her tiny voice. Her grandmother dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, overwhelmed by the innocence and sincerity of the moment. Corporal Mitchell watched as children gathered around his post as well. A 10-year-old boy named Jamie approached with a small British flag that his grandfather had given him. Jamie's grandfather, Robert Sterling, was a military veteran himself and understood the significance of the Guard's service. "Go on, lad," Robert encouraged his grandson. "Show them you appreciate what they do." Jamie stepped forward and, with great ceremony, placed the small flag at the base of Mitchell's post. He then stepped back and gave a crisp salute, just as his grandfather had taught him. The gesture was so earnest and well-intentioned that several adults in the crowd felt their throats tighten with emotion. Meanwhile, Emma had not moved from her spot near William. She continued to hold her drawing, but now she was talking to him in a steady, comfortable stream of conversation, as if speaking to an old friend. "My mummy says you probably have a family too," Emma chatted. "Do you have little children like me? I bet they're very proud of you. I would be proud if my daddy stood so straight and tall and protected everyone." Sarah Chen listened to her daughter's one-sided conversation with growing amazement. Emma's natural empathy and ability to see the person behind the uniform was teaching the adults around her something important about recognition and appreciation. A local news reporter, Jennifer Walsh, had arrived with her camera crew after receiving tips about the unusual gathering at the palace. But As she observed the scene, she realized this wasn't a story to be sensationalized. Instead, it was a beautiful reminder of the connection between those who serve and those they protect. "This is remarkable," Jennifer whispered to her cameraman. "These children are showing more understanding and respect than many adults manage to express." As the crowd grew, the palace officials began to take notice. Captain David Ross, the officer in charge of the guard detail, emerged from the palace to assess the situation. He had been prepared to disperse what he assumed was a disruptive gathering, but what he found stopped him in his tracks. Instead of chaos or disruption, he witnessed an orderly, respectful display of appreciation unlike anything he had seen in his 20 years of service. Children were quietly offering thanks. Parents were teaching valuable lessons about respect and service, and the guards themselves were handling the situation with remarkable professionalism while maintaining their duties. Captain Ross made a decision that would later be discussed in military circles for months to come. Rather than dispersing the crowd, he chose to allow the interaction to continue, recognizing its educational and inspirational value. Emma, still chatting with William, had begun to tell him about her school and her friends. "My best friend is named Sophie, and she wants to be a police officer when she grows up. She says she wants to help people just like you do. I told her about you, and she made you this too." Emma reached into her backpack again and pulled out another small drawing. This one signed Sophie at the bottom. It showed two stick figures in uniforms shaking hands with a group of children. "Sophie couldn't come today because she has a cold, but she wanted you to know that you're her hero," Emma explained seriously. "She says heroes are people who do important jobs, even when it's hard work." The wisdom coming from these young children was profound in its simplicity. They understood concepts of service, sacrifice, and appreciation in ways that cut through complexity and politics to reach the fundamental truth about why people choose to serve others. As the afternoon approached, it became clear that this spontaneous gathering had evolved into something much more significant than anyone had anticipated. What started with one little girl's drawing had become a powerful demonstration of the relationship between protectors and the protected, between service and appreciation, between duty and humanity. The guards continued their posts, maintaining their professional standards while somehow acknowledging the extraordinary circumstances unfolding around them. Each subtle gesture, each careful movement, each moment of eye contact became part of a larger conversation about respect, service, and the simple but powerful act of saying thank you. By mid-afternoon, news of the extraordinary gathering at Buckingham Palace had reached the highest levels of the royal household. The Queen's private secretary, Sir Edward Hamilton, had received multiple reports about the unusual but heartwarming scene taking place at the main gates. What made this situation particularly noteworthy was not just the children's gestures of appreciation, but the guards' subtle yet professional responses while maintaining their ceremonial duties. The delicate balance between tradition and human connection was being navigated with remarkable skill by the guards involved. Emma had been joined by her two older siblings, 10-year-old Michael and 8-year-old Sophie Chun. Their mother, Sarah, had initially planned a quick visit to the palace before running errands, but the meaningful interaction developing between her youngest daughter and Sergeant Thompson had convinced her to stay longer. "Mummy, can we bring the guards some water?" Michael asked, noticing that William had been standing motionless for hours. "He must be thirsty." Sarah smiled at her son's thoughtfulness. "That's very kind of you to think of that, sweetheart. But the guards have special schedules for when they can take breaks. There are other guards who will come to relieve them when it's time." This explanation led to a broader discussion among the gathered children about the guards' working conditions, their training, and the dedication required for their role. Parents found themselves learning alongside their children as they researched and shared information about the Queen's Guard traditions. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, a child psychologist who happened to be visiting London with her family, observed the interactions with professional interest. She was struck by the children's natural ability to recognize and appreciate service, as well as their instinctive understanding of appropriate boundaries. "Children often see things more clearly than adults," Dr. Morrison commented to another parent. "They're responding to these guards as fellow human beings while still respecting their official role. It's quite remarkable." Meanwhile, Sergeant Thompson was experiencing something he had never felt during his years of service. The constant presence of appreciative children, their innocent conversations, and their genuine expressions of gratitude were giving him a new perspective on the meaning of his work. Emma had settled into a comfortable routine of talking to him, while occasionally showing him new drawings that other children had made. She had appointed herself as his unofficial spokesperson, explaining to newcomers why it was important to appreciate the guards and how they could show respect. "The guard can't talk back to us because he's working," Emma explained to a group of 5-year-olds who had just arrived. "But he can see our pictures and hear our thank yous. My mummy says that sometimes the most important jobs are the ones where you have to be quiet and watch." Her simple explanation helped other children understand the situation and encouraged them to participate in ways that were appropriate and respectful. Soon, a small collection of drawings, letters, and small gifts had accumulated near William's post, each one carefully placed where he could see them. Corporal Mitchell was experiencing a similar transformation at his post. Children had begun approaching him with their own offerings of appreciation, and he found himself deeply moved by their sincerity. A group of siblings had brought him a small card made from construction paper that read, "Thank you for being brave every day." The crowd of adults watching these interactions grew throughout the day, but it maintained a respectful and orderly atmosphere. Parents used the opportunity to teach their children about service, duty, and appreciation, while grandparents shared stories about their own experiences with military service. One elderly gentleman, Mr. Albert Richardson, approached with his great-grandson, 5-year-old Charlie. Mr. Richardson had served in the Royal Navy during World War II and understood the significance of the Guard's service from personal experience. Young Charlie here wanted to say thank you, Mr. Richardson said quietly, positioning his great-grandson near William's post. "I've told him about how important it is to appreciate those who serve our country." Charlie stepped forward with a small wooden toy soldier that had clearly been well-loved. "My great-grandpa gave me this," he said in a whisper loud enough for everyone to hear. "He says soldiers and guards are the same kind of brave. I want you to have it so you remember that little kids like me think you're special." He carefully placed the toy soldier at the base of William's post, then stepped back and gave a wobbly salute just as his great-grandfather had taught him. The gesture was so heartfelt that many adults in the crowd felt tears spring to their eyes. As the day progressed, palace staff began to realize they were witnessing something historically significant. Never before had there been such a sustained, peaceful demonstration of appreciation for the Queen's Guard. The interaction was organic, respectful, and educational for everyone involved. Captain Ross made several observations throughout the day, noting how the guards maintained their professional standards while somehow acknowledging the extraordinary circumstances. He began to consider whether this spontaneous event could inform future policies about public interaction with the guards. The story was now being covered by international news outlets, but the focus remained on the positive aspects of the interaction rather than treating it as a disruption or breach of protocol. Social media was filled with photos and videos of children offering their handmade gifts and heartfelt messages to the stoic but somehow responsive guards. As evening approached, it became clear that this day would be remembered not just by those who participated, but by anyone who heard about it. The simple act of a 4-year-old girl offering a drawing to a guard had sparked a movement of appreciation that demonstrated the best aspects of both childhood innocence and adult guidance. Emma, who had started it all, remained near William's post as the crowds began to thin. She had made several new friends among the other children and had become something of a leader in explaining to newcomers how to show proper respect while expressing appreciation. "I think the guard knows we love him," Emma announced to her mother as the afternoon sun began to cast longer shadows across the courtyard. "Even though he can't say anything back, I can tell he's happy because his eyes look different now." Her observation was surprisingly accurate. Those who had been watching William throughout the day could indeed see a subtle change in his expression, a warmth that hadn't been there in the morning. The children's genuine appreciation had somehow reached through the formal barriers of protocol to touch the man behind the uniform as the sun began to set over London, casting a golden glow across the palace courtyard. The most remarkable part of this extraordinary day was yet to unfold. The changing of the guard ceremony was scheduled to begin, and hundreds of tourists had gathered to witness the traditional display of military precision and pageantry. But today's ceremony would be different from any other in the palace's long history. Emma and her family had decided to stay to watch the ceremony, along with many of the other children who had participated in the day's spontaneous celebration of appreciation. The collection of drawings, letters, and small gifts that had accumulated throughout the day created a colorful display around the guards' posts. Captain Ross faced an unprecedented decision. Protocol dictated that the area should be cleared of all personal items before the ceremony began, but removing the children's heartfelt gifts seemed inappropriate given the day's events. After a brief consultation with senior palace officials, he made a choice that would become part of palace folklore. The children's offerings would remain in place during the ceremony. As the relief guards marched into position with their characteristic precision and ceremony, something beautiful happened. The children who had spent the day showing appreciation to the on-duty guards naturally began to applaud, but not in the typical tourist fashion. Their applause was respectful, timed, and clearly intended to honor both the guards who had served throughout the day and those arriving to take their place. Emma, now recognized by many as the child who had started the day's events, stepped forward with one final gesture. She had spent the last hour working on a special drawing, this one showing multiple guards surrounded by children of all ages, with a rainbow arching over the palace in the background. As Sergeant Thompson prepared to be relieved of his duty, Emma approached one more time. She held up her newest creation and said loudly enough for the gathered crowd to hear, "This is for all the guards, not just you. I want everyone to know that children everywhere think you're all heroes." What happened next would be talked about for years to come and would eventually lead to changes in how the palace approached public interaction with the Queen's Guard. Sergeant Thompson, in full view of hundreds of tourists, his commanding officers, and the relief guard preparing to take his position, did something unprecedented. He slowly, deliberately, and with great dignity, gave Emma the slightest nod of acknowledgement. It was subtle enough to maintain the dignity of his position, but clear enough that everyone present understood its significance. The crowd erupted in applause, but it wasn't the typical tourist reaction. This was something deeper, a recognition that they had witnessed a moment when tradition and humanity found a perfect balance, when duty and compassion coexisted beautifully. The relief guard, Private James Harrison, had been briefed on the day's events and was prepared for the unusual circumstances. As he took his position, he too was greeted by children with drawings and words of appreciation. The seamless transition from one guard to another, both showing subtle acknowledgement of the children's gestures while maintaining their professional duties, demonstrated the adaptability and humanity of these highly trained soldiers. As the ceremony concluded and the crowd began to disperse, palace officials made an announcement that surprised everyone present. Sir Edward Hamilton stepped forward to address the gathered crowd. "Today has been exceptional," he began. "We have witnessed something beautiful. Children expressing genuine appreciation for those who serve, and our guards demonstrating that tradition and human connection can coexist. The palace has decided that the children's gifts and letters will be collected and presented to the Guards Regiment as a permanent reminder of this special day." The announcement was met with enthusiastic applause from both children and adults. Emma beamed with pride, knowing that her simple gesture had grown into something much larger and more meaningful than she could have imagined. But the story doesn't end there. In the weeks that followed, the palace received hundreds of letters and drawings from children around the world who had heard about the events of that day. Schools began organizing field trips specifically to teach children about the importance of appreciating those who serve their communities and countries. The guards themselves requested permission to display some of the children's artwork in their barracks, creating a permanent reminder of the day when their formal duties intersected beautifully with genuine human appreciation. Sergeant Thompson later said in an interview that Emma's simple gesture had reminded him why he chose to serve in the first place. "Children see things clearly," he reflected. They understood that behind the uniform and the ceremony were people who care about protecting others. Their appreciation meant more than any formal recognition could. Emma's mother, Sarah, found that the day had a profound impact on her entire family. Her children began looking for ways to thank other service members and community helpers, from police officers to firefighters to healthcare workers. The lesson they learned about expressing gratitude became a cornerstone of their family values. The story spread far beyond London, inspiring similar gestures of appreciation for service members around the world. Military bases, police stations, and fire departments began receiving drawings and letters from children who wanted to follow Emma's example. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, the child psychologist who had observed the day's events, later wrote about the interaction in a professional journal, noting how children's natural empathy and adults' guidance had created a perfect storm of positive social interaction. 6 months later, Emma and her family were invited back to the palace for a special ceremony honoring community service. She was presented with a small replica of a guard's hat and a certificate thanking her for demonstrating the best qualities of citizenship and appreciation. When asked what she learned from the experience, Emma's answer was simple and profound. I learned that saying thank you is one of the most important things you can do, and that even when people can't say thank you back, they still feel happy when you're nice to them. The day that began with one little girl's drawing had evolved into a lasting lesson about the power of appreciation, the importance of service, and the beautiful possibility that exists when tradition embraces humanity. It became known as Emma's Day in palace circles, a reminder that sometimes the most meaningful moments come from the simplest gestures of kindness and recognition. The Queen's Guard continues their ancient duty of protecting the royal family and maintaining tradition, but they now do so with the knowledge that their service is seen, appreciated, and valued by the youngest members of the society they serve to protect. And sometimes, just sometimes, that makes standing perfectly still for hours on end feel like the most important job in the world.